Spotlight is a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. It seeks to spotlight people, places, and events from around the Diocese of Youngstown that promote the new gospel of joy called for by Pope Francis. Your program host is Father James Corda.
Hello and welcome to Spotlight. I'm Father Jim Corda. Today we're going to talk about marriage, family life, and the many challenges of marriage and family life. And joining me in today's show is Guy Vogrin and Dave Schmidt. Welcome to Spotlight.
Thank you, Father.
You know, what's nice about this topic is that there's so much for us to talk about. And I think what I'd like to do is to ask both of you, first of all, what your involvement in the whole idea of marriage is, and then we'll get into our discussion. So we'll start with you, Guy.
I'll defer to
Dave. Very good.
Over here because he's the...
Good.
Well, I'm in the Office of Pro-Life Marriage and Family Life at the Diocese, and so it's my job primarily, in speaking of marriage, to support the bishop's policy on marriage preparation and regarding helping parishes with programming, whether they have sponsor couples, conducting our engaged couple retreats, promoting natural family planning throughout the diocese. But in addition to that, there's also concerns about marriage enrichment, offering programming regarding that, programs on that can help families be stronger families, and then paying attention to people who might be suffering special circumstances, such as those who are divorced, offering programs that help them to realize that the church cares about them, and the church is trying to assist them with that. As well as something we're doing new this year is a memorial service for those who've lost children to miscarriage or stillbirth.
Very good. And Guy, tell us about your involvement in the whole idea of marriage.
Okay. I am the coordinator for the Retrovi program in the Youngstown Diocese. Now, Retrovi is a worldwide organization that is, I would not say part of the Catholic Church, but is affiliated with the teachings of Catholic teachings for marriage. And of course, it's for troubled married couples, those that are feeling some kind of disillusionment with their relationship. And of course, we have programs throughout the United States, I think about 40 or so states, and all across the world. So the program is based on a weekend where troubled couples can go and get away from their distractions and try to rediscover their relationship. And this is through a series of presentations similar to a worldwide marriage encounter weekend. As a matter of fact, Retrovi was established in 1977 out of that movement. So it borrows a lot in the formatting. And after that weekend, hopefully your communication skills have been sharpened. You've found some hope in the relationship, which comes from God, and you can go on. And then we have a series of follow-ups where we try to tackle some of the conflicts. So basically, in a nutshell, that's it.
Let's talk about family life. You know, family life is something that affects all of us. And how important is it to have a very productive but a very positive family life in order to nurture marriages? Is that proper to say?
Well, you could call the family as the primary place. Pope John Paul II was fond of calling it the school of life and love. And he also identified in marriage preparation, remote marriage preparation, which is primarily children watching the example of their parents and seeing how their parents deal with things and so forth. And then he also referred to more proximate marriage preparation, which would be through catechesis and all, but still, nonetheless, the parents still have a major role. One of the things at the engaged couple retreats I'd like to ask, we do a little bit of an icebreaker at the beginning and trying to get a sense of where the couples are coming from and have them stand if different categories pertain to them. And one of the things I ask is who or what group had the greatest influence on your marriage? The vast majority stand when I say parents and family. Mm-hmm. And so parents and family life are obviously unequaled in terms of the influence on the future marriages of young people.
You know, when you talk about marriages, and Guy, you had mentioned about Retrovi and dealing with troubled marriages, there's obviously certain tools that are necessary in any kind of relationship, and more in particular in a marriage. And I think some of those tools are good listening skills, good communication skills. Is it your experience that those tools and those skills sometimes are getting lost in a marriage?
Exactly.
And that's why there's a reason for
I think this modern culture, and it was very appropriate why post-Vatican II Catholic Church kind of looks on the family as the domestic church. Mm-hmm. And of course, because of that symbolism, the attack is on us. Mm-hmm. And so that family attack kind of distracts people away from their roles. The father, as the role of father, is more concerned with making a living. And has a career, so he compartmentalizes his family into one part of his brain, so to speak, and then he kind of loses that integrity that God has made us to be. And so I think Retrovi tries to separate these lives and shows them through the skill of what we call the dialogue process, where we show that you have a physical life, you have a spiritual life, you have an emotional life, and all of those have to be running in tandem with one another. They can't be running in opposite directions for you to be the person that God made you to be.
And we know through experience that marriage and married life and family life is not easy, that there's many challenges that are built in, there's many roadblocks at times, and so it's important to foster good, healthy ways of dealing with these issues that we have. We're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and talk specifically about some more of those challenges and about the sacrament of marriage in a moment. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
What have you done for your marriage today?
I gave my wife a hug this morning. I told her I love her. Instead of sitting on the couch, I hope to clean up.
I cooked my husband's favorite breakfast.
I sent my husband a love email.
What have I done for my marriage today? It's a good question.
I gave her a call and say, thinking of her. And the kids.
I did her hair this morning. I think it looks pretty good.
We're going to the museums as a family.
What have I done for my marriage today?
I made my wife coffee and breakfast this morning.
It's going to be her birthday next week, so I've been spending time today making arrangements to make that extra special.
Oh, we're spending the day together?
I bought her an orchid.
Hassan was able to let me sleep in by taking care of him in the morning.
I read the newspaper to my wife, and it cracked her up. She's still laughing.
What have you done for your marriage today? Small changes can make a world of difference. Get started at foryourmarriage.org, a message from the Catholic Church.
My name is Sister Mary Claudina, and I run a home for abandoned children. I want to take care of children who have no parents, because luckily I come from a very loving family. There are 8 of us. We learn to care for each other, to love each other, to fight among each other, just to be a family. And I think that's what I learned from home, and I wanted to share that with children who do not have that opportunity.
Welcome back to our show. I'm talking with Guy Vogrin and Dave Schmidt about marriage. Let's focus now about marriage as a sacrament, and let's kind of define exactly what that means. Can you do that for us, Dave?
Yeah, one of the priests I worked for over the years used to define sacrament as something ordinary that conveys the extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And I think that pertains to marriage in a very beautiful way, that a couple may look ordinary, they may seem normal enough, but through the grace of the sacrament of marriage, they convey the extraordinary. They convey a glimpse into the love of God. Mm-hmm. Marriage through Scripture was often used by the prophets to describe the relationship between God and His people. Mm-hmm. And then Jesus comes as the bridegroom to welcome His church. And so again, marriage, it also reminds me of the movie Les Mis. There's a line in there that says to love another person is to see the face of God. Mm-hmm. And that two people who are seeking to approach marriage in the sacramental sense are trying to live a life where they're conveying the presence of God to each other for the rest of their lives.
And let's talk about the importance of God in married life, and in particular in sacramental married life. In your experience, Guy, with Retrovi, have couples tended to shut God out of the picture? Is that why maybe some problems enter into marriages?
I think it goes back to the very beginning of the marriage, where they may be looking at it as a contract where it's a 50-50 proposition. Well, God deals with covenants, exchange mm-hmm. of persons, mm-hmm. and that's where you give totally of yourself. If you remember his first covenant with Adam, right. And he gave him the garden, mm-hmm. and he just expected to give himself totally, and he provided totally on he just asked for one thing, and that covenant was broken. Mm-hmm. And I think going back to the garden and marriage was in the Garden of Eden. Right. So, and it just reflects God's love in the Trinity, God's love for mm-hmm. His Son, and that sparked the Holy Spirit. Well, a husband's love for his wife sparks offsprings. Right. So that total image is painted right on the marriage covenant.
And obviously, certain aspects and parts of marriage really are for procreation and the intimacy and the sexuality, and I've discovered oftentimes that maybe couples don't talk about that a lot. Is that right. true, or is that something that's a myth?
They think it's just something for the movies. Well, no, God created us, created marriage for us. He saw it was very good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the church identifies the purpose of marriage as for the good of the spouses and for the procreation and education of children, mm-hmm. which is really the purpose of the gift of sexuality in marriage, right. for the good of the spouses, an expression of the bond between them, the two becoming one, but also is the way by which God designed us, that a new human life created in His image and likeness comes into the world. Which makes the family a very holy place. Guy mentioned before mm-hmm. about the family as a domestic church. And of course, marriage is the foundation of that.
Mm-hmm. When we talk about marriage preparation, let's say, what are some of the things that really go into that? And what are some of the issues that young couples, right on the threshold of marriage, really should be aware of? What are some of those issues?
I think one of the things is to give a vision of marriage as a sacrament, as marriage in God's plan. Our society has a tendency to come that our marriage is whatever we want it to be, which there's a contradiction there, because if it's whatever we want it to be, then why is it a public reality? But at the same time, people who get married, they want their family, they want their friends, they want everybody important to them to know about this thing that they're celebrating. But marriage is, as far as preparation, that sense of vision, But there's practical things we're trying to instill upon them too. One of the things Guy already alluded to is that marriages go through stages. I think everybody knows the honeymoon stage. There's a resource that we give to the engaged couples on the engaged couple retreats called Just Married by Dr. Greg and Lisa Popchak. And they identified the second stage as the conflict negotiation stage, which sometimes comes as a surprise to the couples because there's a sense that everything's going to be those good feelings and romance. But as they put their lives together, there's things that they're going to inevitably bump up against conflict, and they're going to have to negotiate and talk things through. And then, and if nothing else, just to let them know that when they get to that stage, something I think Marriage Encounter would call the disillusionment stage.
Exactly.
The letting go of one's illusions. That's life. Their world isn't falling apart. That this too will pass if they just stick to it. And one of the things we try to instill upon them is the marriage is the only sacrament, at least according to the Latin rite of the Church, that's ministered by lay people. It's the couple ministering marriage to each other. And so they get to minister marriage to each other for each and every day of the rest of their lives. And some days they're going to do it better than others.
And Retrovi provides the healing balm a little bit because we teach the dialogue, the communication, and also that conflict resolution that Dave has been talking about. And I want to get back to the 4 stages. It mirrors Christ's life on earth. You know, he had 30 years with his family, with Joseph and Mary, and how wonderful. Talk about a honeymoon period there with the Blessed Mother. But then at Cana, the disillusionment started. And he made it clear to his mom, do you want this to start right now? And he did. And then we see he being disillusioned at his home synagogue in Nazareth when he mentioned that the prophecy was being fulfilled. They wanted to throw him off the cliff.
Right.
And then he was talking about the bread of life, and it was him and how they would have to eat him, and many of his disciples left him there. And then, of course, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane and went into misery. And so often, like you say, that couples, when they get to that stage, their walls go up and they hide into themselves. Well, this is the time to seek out the community because we all experience this disillusionment, this misery, because our Savior did, because it's a sacrament.
We're going to talk more about that in a moment, but we're going to take a quick break. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
There is a place where a total stranger will give you their blood. There is a place where someone you never knew will save your child from drowning. A place where people from 7 states away will turn up at your door and give you food and shelter after a flood. There's a place where a person who doesn't look like you, talk like you, or dress like you will stretch out their hand and put it across your shoulders and say, everything is going to be okay. That place is called America, where we look out for each other, and it's up to us to keep it that way. When you help the American Red Cross, you help America.
I am Marino.
Yo soy Marino.
Marino, an American Catholic organization of priests and brothers, has been reaching out to those in need for nearly 100 years in 26 countries throughout the world. Missioners, workers, volunteers, supporters, we are all Marino.
I'm Father Mike, and I am Marino.
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 Welcome back to Spotlight. I'm talking with Dave Schmidt and Guy Vogrin about marriage and family life. When we talk about marriage and family life, we know that every relationship, every marriage is not perfect. We are not perfect. And there's certain things that tend to creep in to make us imperfect. But if we are aware of those things maybe beforehand, it can better help us or equip us to meet those different challenges, whether it's in marriage or family life or even in our own personal relationships. So what would be some of the problems that really are part of marriage that a young couple preparing for marriage, let's say, or even couples could be aware of to try to assuage?
Well, one of the things we try to communicate to the couples on the engaged couple retreats is John Gottman of the Gottman Institute. He's one of the foremost authorities in couple communication, specifically conflict resolution. And based on his work, you get the impression that good marriages are like snowflakes. There's no two exactly alike. But he sees certain patterns. In fact, he calls them the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Because if these 4 patterns of communication keep presenting themselves, it could spell the end of days. It could spell gloom and doom. And one of those is criticism. Couples being critical of each other. You always, you never, that kind of language. Another is contempt. Contempt could be name calling. Contempt could be very subtle, like eye rolling. Contempt is pretty much any time when what's being communicated is that one's spouse is inferior. And another is defensiveness. Of rather than deal with the problem, say, well, you're not so great, or you do the same thing I do, and then stonewalling is very unfortunate. That's when the couple just sort of gives up and they clam up and they don't communicate. And basically, those 4 types of communication, if we can learn to avoid those, and we learn to avoid them primarily through things like I statements. It's like I try to tell the couples now, we're not saying that they have no right to complain if they see something wrong in their marriage, but rather than say, you always do such and such, say, when you do such and such, I feel. And that type of approach is much more likely to get from our spouse a more sympathetic response. Well, I didn't realize I was doing that, or I'm sorry I'm doing that. And Dr. Gottman likens it to teammates kicking a soccer ball back and forth. The soccer ball represents the problem, so they kick it back and forth with the goal that they're trying to get it down the field, instead of kicking at each other. The 4 types of communication we used before would be like kicking at each other rather than at the problem.
In our follow-up session, the climax to it is our conflict resolution presentation, and the goal there is to win-learn, not to win-win. There's no competition among husband and wife. They're on the same team. It's the same domestic church, and we have to look at the goal as being the success of our children and their children, and bringing God's kingdom to them.
Now, in the Retrovive program, Guy, obviously some of these issues are addressed. Some of these problems are always addressed.
All the 4 that Dave's I see almost every Friday night when we assemble at the Villa Maria for a weekend. Yes, we see that highly, and then by the end of the 6-week program, after the follow-ups, we have some couples, not all, I would say 50% of those that start on the Friday night only make it to the final presentation of the follow-ups. So it's a hard road, but it's worth the battle.
One thing I'd like to talk about just extremely briefly is the whole issue of divorce, because it's a reality in our world today. What do we want to say to the folks that are with us that have experienced that might still be in pain because of that? What would you share with them in light of that?
Well, we do have, our failures at the Retrovive program, but I want to tell them, take some of the tools, because usually the divorced couple still has kids, so they can still be respectful to one another. They can treat each other as the mother of their children, the father of their children, and always keep it above board. And at least there, you have a friendship developed.
And divorce is a extremely complicated form of loss. I've had numerous people who are divorced tell me, not that they wish their ex-spouse was dead, but it'd be easier to mourn their loss knowing that they weren't still out there walking around. And then there's just a constant trying to reevaluate what they could have done in the relationship and so forth. And the key thing is that the church holds such a high ideal of marriage, but the church deeply cares about those who, for whatever reason, find themselves divorced. And the church wants to walk with them in the process of finding healing and growing from the unfortunate experience.
Right. It's not an unforgivable sin. God still loves those people dearly.
Sure. Let's say that the folks that are with us might want more information on marriage preparation, and Retrovi. What are some of the ways that they can get in touch?
Okay, well, Retrovi has programs in the Cleveland, Pittsburgh, and Youngstown area, and we usually do, between all of us, about 8 programs a year. So just check the website, helpourmarriage.com, and that's the best way. And if you have any questions, there's phone numbers there that you could contact, and hopefully I can be helpful to you.
And Dave, what about you?
And we'll go to the diocesan website. It's probably the easiest URL to remember, DOY.org. DOY, of course, for Diocese of Youngstown. If somebody's looking specifically for marriage preparation, you just have to scroll down to the bottom of the home page. There's a picture of a couple getting married there, and there's a few links that help them get to where they need to be. For other programs, if they would, under the Offices tab, find the Office of Pro-Life, Marriage, and Family Life. We try to keep things up to date on there.
Okay. Well, in our closing remarks, we certainly want to leave the folks that are with us that whole sense of a message of hope, that God is with us, God is present, and if we have that hope, then we could certainly overcome many of the challenges that kind of enter in, whether it's family life, marriage life, any personal relationships. So we certainly want to impress the folks that are with us that element of hope is so important to hold on to and to have in our lives.
One thing to keep in mind, love is a decision, and so is things like trust and forgiveness. So it's us that hold the key to these things. So we can always begin today to make those decisions. And so often the culture likes to say love is an emotion. Well, I would rather act and have emotions follow me than act on my emotions.
Guy Vogrin, Dave Schmidt, thank you so much for being with us and enlightening us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. Have a good day, and God be with you.
Spotlight has been a production of CTNY, the Catholic Television Network of Youngstown. Your program host was Father James Corda.